Hello, everyone. Good morning. Wishing you a tremendous Sunday morning as we wake up after UFC Austin. And we saw a lot of teachable moments last night, a lot of fighters who uh, came and fought to their strengths. Some fighters who looked like they had no semblance of a game plan whatsoever. Some fighters that may potentially get their walking papers after horrific performances. And we saw some fighters showing out. Like in the main event, for instance, we had Arman Sarukian, who came in. He closed as a significant favorite. Let's go right to that banner right here. We've got Arman Sarukian, who defeated Benny Dariush in the main event of the evening. And Sarukian came out, used his aggressiveness. And one thing I'll say is that multiple strikes to the same side, the flying knee followed up, I think it was a right hand, ended up flooring Benny Dariush, who has been brutally knocked out a number of times now. Edson Barbosa did it. Hernandez did it. Alexander Hernandez. And got a feel for Benny Dariush. He wasn't even able to get his motor going. By the way, this is a Q&A session as well too. So if you have questions, comments in the comment section, we'll address those. And this is an open forum. So glad to have everybody here as we provide a UFC Austin recap. Thank you for folks who are joining right now. I see a few people in the stream. I appreciate you. So Sarukian, it's interesting. This was his first legitimate fight against a top tier opponent other than his debut when he came in and he fought valiantly as a 22-year-old against Mateusz Gamrot. Against Islam Makhachev. And then he also took on Mateusz Gamrot as well. So Arman Sarukian has fought a few solid contenders. You have the Joel Alvarez fight, and then you also have the Joaquim Silva fight, where he came out guns blazing and was able to put Silva away late in that fight. We've got a lot of promise here for Sarukian, who's now only 27 years of age. The arrow is pointed up, and I posed a question last night on Twitter. How would Arman Sarukian fare against folks like Justin Gaethje, like Dustin Poirier, like Charles do Bronx Oliveira, even Conor McGregor, if he ended up somehow coming back down to 155 pounds? It looks like McGregor could be fighting at middleweight right now, the size of his dome. Interesting. So I see Sarukian defeating all of those fighters. The one fighter who could potentially pose some serious problems just due to his unpredictability and the way he throws up submissions is probably Charles do Bronx Oliveira. But Arman Sarukian headed in the right direction. No play for Mr. Gray. Dariush, yeah. Dariush goes back to the drawing board here. It would not surprise me to see Dariush hang him up, to be honest. So let's walk our way through this card. First fight of the night, we had Veronica Macedo, who defeated Jamie Lynn Horth. And you saw this was a situation where low-level women's mixed martial arts, volatility, unpredictability. You saw Jamie Lynn Horth, who did not fight to her strengths, got outworked, and ended up losing a split decision to Veronica Hardy, one of the fights that I recommended folks stayed away. And oh man, Hardy, now where does she go from here? The jury is still out on her. You know, the Bea Malecki fight was a clear, horrific look. And then she ends up taking some time off, comes back and rattles off a couple of wins here. So solid workmanlike performance from Veronica Hardy, and she is on her way. Let's see. Horth didn't start fighting until the third round using her size and physicality. It's amazing to me. You bring up a great point, Shady, in that there are a lot of fighters who don't fight to their strengths on the roster. And we saw one fighter who did last night in Sean Brady. Sean Brady was able to stick to a grappling heavy game plan. And that was a real difference maker for him yesterday. He didn't get caught up in striking with Kelvin Gastelum at all, and rinse and repeat on the mat. The mat returns. The lightning quick transitions were a big help for Sean Brady there. But let's also talk a fighter who got away from his strengths in Wellington Turman. Now he's sitting there locking horns in the stand-up with Jared Gooden, which is not necessarily the best thing to do. He ends up getting rocked. And yeah, you're right. There were a lot of boos for Sean Brady out there, and he tried to ignore it to a certain degree. I know before he got the mic, he was starting to lose his manure, and then he got the reins, got himself under control there. Let's get back to Jared Gooden, who was able to rock Wellington Turman on the feet. I know Wellington Turman initially had some success early, but look what happened there. Gooden ends up putting Wellington Turman in a tough spot, and then Gooden is the one locking up the submission. I was a little shocked by that. I know that Gooden has some semblance of a ground game, but Wellington Turman, we know his grappling is what got him to the UFC, and he gets exposed again. So what can you say there? Wellington Turman, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets his walking papers here. There are a few fighters here who it wouldn't shock me to see them get cut from the UFC. I think Wellington Turman's going to be one of them. And then Jared Gooden, he earns himself the right to fight again. And at 170 pounds, I ask, who would you like to see Jared Gooden, Night Train fight? And you saw the choo-choo going there. Happy for him, especially Jared Gooden's, the way he battled back from the Bruno Oliveira knockout loss in 2019. You saw the guy, he's had his mettle tested, and he rattled off 3 wins after getting brutally knocked out. And then he gets in there last night and earns another victory. JP, you say you still think Brady's ceiling is limited. I agree. If you get someone who can stifle his takedown attempts, and if you're able to keep him off of your back, he's there to be had on the feet. And Kelvin Gastelum really looked like not only was he off, but he looked a step behind, and his striking, there was a moment of separation. I believe it was towards the end of the first round where he threw a 1-2 and a leg kick, and it looked like he was either gassed or injured. It was just a very strange look for Kelvin Gastelum. Usually see him come out sharp in the first round, and that was not what I like to see out of Gastelum. So all praise be to Sean Brady there. Very impressive. I lost a bet on Kelvin Gastelum at plus 100 there, and you saw, I mean, it was pretty clear that there were levels there on the mat. And the key here is that Sean Brady stuck to his strengths, and he fought with the skill set that got him to the UFC. And you see fighters who try to become more well-rounded as they progress, and then they fall in love with their hands and try to stand and strike with folks. And you saw Brady, he got caught against Bilal Muhammad, and he had no business striking there. We know the striking defense of Sean Brady, some of the worst you'll see in the entirety of the UFC, both he and Pat Sabatini. And he stuck to his strengths. And you heard at the end of his post-fight speech too, his victory speech, he said, I'm gonna stick to what got me here, basically, that he's gonna grapple heavy. So I like hearing that from Sean Brady. Very happy for him. What's up, LP? Thank you for popping in here. I appreciate you. Thank you for pouring into the previous Q&A, and I know you've got a great head on your shoulders. So if you have any questions or you want to chime in here, feel free to do so whenever. Thank you. let's see. Aren't you doing PFL Bellator previews? Well, yeah, we'll get into that. We have a number of fighters here who may end up on the PFL Bellator roster. And we'll talk a few more fights here. Unlucky last night. All right, yeah. So you dropped a little over a unit, and that is the key here. If you are going to have a losing night, you want to make sure that you keep losses to a minimum. I lost about a unit and a quarter last night, 1 unit, and that's the key here. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you could potentially lose 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30% of your bankroll on one given night. I mentioned this in previous breakdowns and broadcasts that my worst night of 2023 was in April 22nd, and it was only a 2-unit, minus 2.95 unit loss for the entirety of the year. So trying to pick your spots is key here. And we'll talk in a few minutes about fighters who came up short and did not fight to their strengths. But here, let's discuss briefly Ihor Potieria, who came out guns blazing. He was sharp as a tack, and he fought a tank in Rodolfo Vieira. Sorry, Rodolfo Bellato. I think I said that one other time in a previous breakdown. Rodolfo Vieira. By the way, I don't know why I have Rodolfo Vieira in my head. But Rodolfo Bellato came out, and he was getting pieced up. And he was within a strike or two. It depends on the referee, but that could have been a win for Potieria multiple times yesterday. This referee could have stopped in, and without debate, that was a finish for Potieria. And he let it go, and Bellato came back to life. We saw it happen. Bellato came back to life, turned the tide. Potieria ended up emptying his clip basically on Bellato, and Potieria runs out of gas and gets TKO'd in mount. It was pretty sad to see for Potieria, because you can see that he's a pretty talented fighter, and he's a front runner. You have front runners out there who they can't make it out the other side. They can't. Once a round and a half goes by, the wheels completely fall off, and we've seen that happen numerous times. Let's see. JP says, I was down a single unit overall myself. Yeah, that was a very, very wild fight. Very wild fight. And you could imagine the Rodolfo Bellato backers sweating bullets there. So where does Bellato go from here? We've seen now, this is multiple times he's been exposed. The striking defense is just not there. The guy is a tank, but he has horrible defense. And he's slow too, extremely slow. Tough as nails, but slow. And I think that Petrino did a number to him. His chin's been cracked many, many times now. Then we'll talk Drakkar Klose with the slam knockout of Joe Solecki. We know Joe Solecki, he'd been Amada and others have brutally knocked him out in the past, and it happens again. The armbar was locked in, and Drakkar Klose took a big risk slamming his opponent, Joe Solecki, and it was a thing of beauty. Drakkar Klose tried to get 1 or 2 additional strikes in after Solecki was knocked out, but you did have a referee with some semblance of IQ, what they're doing there, and they stopped it. We'll talk about how about that brutal stoppage in the Jalen Turner Bobby Green fight. My God, that was horrific. But this was a good stoppage. You had Drakkar Klose, who was able to get the slam and then the follow-up, and that's it for Joe Solecki. I'll be honest, I think that his UFC run is coming to an end here. I think that you saw he's a bit of a one-trick pony. You can't trust him to strike at all. Maybe half of a round, keep things tight and sharp, and then he has difficulty down the stretch, especially if he can't get his grappling going. And Drakkar Klose, mid-30s. It's funny. I don't know if you caught in the post-fight speech. I think it was Daniel Cormier asked him, "Who do you want next?" And he said, "The easiest fight I can get." And he just wants to get paid. That was really, really interesting. You don't hear that often. A lot of fighters, they want to be tested. And Drakkar Klose just wants to get paid. Um, he's a prize fighter, I guess, at this stage in his respective career. So interesting stuff. We've got a number of additional comments here. Let's see. Undertaker status back to life for Bellato. Yeah, that's basically what took place there. What's your thoughts on betting highly specific prop outcomes, such as Connor to win via round 3 knockout? Interesting stuff. I think that if you're risking maybe a tenth of a unit in spots like that, a quarter of a unit, then you put yourself in a solid situation. But we're talking about sprinkles. Now, it depends on your unit size too. Is it $1,000 a unit? Is it $100 a unit? You also have to consider that too, because you do have folks here who are potentially betting $10 units or so, and then you're talking pennies, etc. So you have to manage that risk appropriately. But of course, if you have plus 1,800 or plus 2,000 plus 2,500 odds on a prop, and you think that there's the implied probabilities off, then yes, it's worth a sprinkle. Back-to-back slam KOs. Only 14 total ever in the UFC. And we remember Ricardo Arona and Rampage Jackson. Man, by the way, you talk about a fighter who left at the top. He didn't come to the UFC, I believe, primarily due to the drug testing, but Ricardo Arona was a force to be reckoned with. Watch his fights in Pride, I believe, during the Grand Prix. I know Shogun took him out, but against Vanderlei Silva, Vanderlei got put in some really tough spots there. In the Sakuraba fight, there's so many fights where Ricardo Arona showcased. I think it was a Brazilian top team. He did tremendous work there. Over or around such as over 2.5 rounds. It's interesting. That's one skill set that I'm continuing to try to fall in love with, the overs. I'm a glutton for unders and finishing fights, and it's a well-roundedness and a change of mentality that needs to be made as far as looking for fights that have a propensity or a high likelihood to last longer than expected. And as a fight fan, of course, you're rooting for fights to finish, and you want excitement, but also you have to understand that if you want to make money and if you see an opportunity where the odds are off and that an over could potentially hit, then yes, target that. Excellent question. Excellent question. Stick to money line. Better to have 3 ways to win instead of 1. Yes, that is one of the most frustrating feelings you could have, is if you pigeonhole yourself into a certain outcome because you got great odds, and then another avenue presents itself for the fighter and they take it to finish it, or they just you see the submissions there. Look at him. He's the fighter's grapevined and they're not defending their neck. Go for that choke, and they don't. They end up TKOing their opponent. And then you lose the bets. That's a frustrating situation. Let's talk Cody Brundage and Zachary Reese. Cody Brundage, here's that back-to-back slam stoppage here, and you get Zachary Reese, who gets bopped on his head. That octagon floor seemed like it was mighty. There was a little bit of density to it yesterday, and people were going out when their heads bounced off of it. So props to Cody Brundage. And you saw Mark Montoya inside of the octagon. That was a beautiful thing to watch that. And by the way, I believe we have Mark Montoya will be cornering Brandon Royval coming up at UFC 296. Looking forward to that. Cody Brundage, back-to-back wins. He's now got a winning streak in the UFC after the victory over Jacob Malkoun. Oh my goodness gracious. Cody Brundage, way to go. I'm happy for him though. He's put up with a lot of banter outside of the octagon, on Twitter, etc., and he gets the win. Now, another fighter who there were two fighters on this card that I was very impressed with their performances. One of them was Sean Brady, and the other it was Misha Tate. Misha Tate looked she looked like $1,000,000 out there. She was able to take on an opponent who this was one of my stay away fights, primarily because you did not know what you were getting out of Julia Avila, and I like to know when I'm working with here. And Misha Tate, we know she's going to come out grappling heavy. Her striking is robotic. She's one of the most predictable fighters. But the Avila side, I had no idea what we were getting, to be honest. And it she's obviously washed. You saw that yesterday. Could not get up from bottom, ended up getting submitted. The way Tate closed distance right off the bat, what did you think of that? She literally, they said go, and and she was already in Avila's corner working for the takedown. That's something that you don't normally see. It was beautiful to watch Tate stick to her strengths. Now I will say this. That I think we're going to get a solid number on whoever Tate is fighting next. And I do think that Misha Tate is fadeable depending on the opponent. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I do think that Julia Avila is going to get her walking papers here. I'm happy for Misha Tate. You saw her stomping the octagon floor. She was limping also, but she felt her oats, and she needed a victory. That was a situation where I think it was the Caitlin Vieira fight and then the Lauren Murphy fight. And it's been a long time. When fighters have to sit with a loss, that's probably, I mean, I'm not a professional fighter, but I know what it's like to have a losing week when it comes from a betting perspective. And that's frustrating because you know what you can do and you believe in yourself and your abilities, and to take a loss, it's tough. And then to let that digest. But for fighters, they have to let that digest for months, sometimes years, if they go on a losing streak. And here you saw how Misha Tate, she really an emotional outpouring from her. That was beautiful to watch, to be honest, especially for somebody as talented as she is. And we know she's a former champion, so she is a talented fighter, but also she's coming to the end of her road too. And I think if you put her up against any top 10 fighter in that division, they give her big problems. So interested to see. I'd also like to hear, who do you think are prospective opponents for Misha Tate here? That's a question. All right, let's see. Let's see what we got. I saw knee pads on Avila and dropped a bet on Tate. Yeah, yeah. You talk about fighting to your strengths, right? Do you have a routine before getting into the mind frame for betting? For me, it's going to the gym to have a clear mindset for the night of UFC betting. Well, I will say this. That's a great question. Typically, so I like to get out and put road work in. Typically, I'll usually run 5-10 miles the morning of a fight card, and I ended up blowing out my ankle and tearing a bunch of ligaments, broke my fibula, etc. And I've been going to physical therapy for the past couple of months, been back up on my feet, walking a few miles a day, every day. And that's something that I need to get back into. That's been a challenge. You talk about the dopamine and endorphins and actually getting those going from a natural runner's high. That's something that I really enjoy. I've run complete marathons in the past, 26-mile marathons. I've done many triathlons, and that's something that keeps me fresh, keeps me going. I also am busy with my children with their sporting events. So that's a great question. I appreciate that. I'm glad you do have a way also, LP, that you go to the gym, get that out of your system. So yes, I agree. I try to dabble in exercise as well on a regular basis. Do you think you get a better read on the fight the closer the fight starts, or do you have a significant line move and then end up betting it? I personally, this is my take, but the lens gradually comes into focus as the fight gets closer. I also like to listen to the pre-fight interviews. You talk about narratives. I'm not necessarily a big believer in narratives, but you can tell a fighter's mindset. And also, for instance, Jalen Turner, right? You saw him look horrific on the scales. And then he alluded to a big time weight cut, and you knew he was going to go for it yesterday evening. I don't think he was ready to go a full 3 rounds. He got Bobby Green out of there. So that was something. 5 to 10 miles. Well, that's something. I played soccer in college, and that's something that I having a cardio base is important. Um, Dustin Stoltzfus defeating Punahele Soriano. This is the fight that I was infuriated when I watched this fight take place, because you had a fighter in Punahele Soriano who, at 31 years of age, it's clear that he has regressed here. The Kopylov fight, you'd think there would be some take-home points, some areas for improvement that would be addressed, and they obviously were not addressed. You saw Punahele Soriano huffing and puffing with 2 minutes left in the first round, and he was throwing the left hand, and there was nothing else coming. There were no feints. He was the one backing up at times. He was letting Dustin Stoltzfus, who's a lower tier opponent, get the better of him. The wrestling, Punahele Soriano has a wrestling background and credentials in Hawaii, and Stoltzfus was tossing him around like a rag doll, and the submissions, not fighting the hands, the submission attempts, the getting dropped at the end of the first round by Dustin Stoltzfus, the pacing was so tepid and low, and Punahele Soriano was still able to be outworked and outlanded, and to get dropped at the end of the first round. That was a horrific look. And this is a fighter. I was at the Dalcha Lungiambula fight, and it's like flipping a page backwards, or 3 pages backwards. Soriano regressed big time, and I haven't seen that poor of a performance in ages, considering the skill set that Soriano has. Soriano's not only a power puncher, but if he marches forward and closes distance, and it was the most predictable, one-dimensional fight I've seen in a long, long time. So I had a unit and a half on Soriano, primarily due to the Stoltzfus side, and that this is a situation where I know I've learned in the past, and a teachable moment here is don't bet on bad fighters. And even though these are 2 bad fighters, but Stoltzfus is clearly the lower caliber fighter here, and still you had Soriano regress to a point where I know he's fighting out of, I believe, Extreme Couture. You see him in there with Dan Ige and others in the training room. So what happened? What went wrong? I saw on my Twitter feed, folks said that Soriano ran out of the octagon with his hands in with his head in his hands. So what happened? Honestly, it was a pathetic performance. That was one of the worst performances I've seen in years, especially considering the skill set. And we know Soriano typically has a solid chin, can throw for power, can find the target. The lack of aggression, the poor cardio, it was real bad. It was real bad. So I was embarrassed to have a bet on Soriano while I watched that fight play out. I know the first round he had the ability to finish Stoltzfus. You saw Stoltzfus was rocked numerous times, and his chin didn't completely crack. But then you had Soriano getting dropped. So horrible look for Puna Soriano. I'm not sure. I believe that he will get cut here, but where's his landing spot? A lot of extreme couture fighters end up in Bellator or PFL. So possibly that's the landing spot, but not a good look at 31 years of age to be continuing to regress at this stage in the professional career when these things are supposed to be taken seriously. And it was back-to-back fights. There were scenes in the Kopylov fight where he was getting hit to the body where you saw he was demoralized and the wheels were starting to fall off. But I would think that time away, getting back to the training room, you address that, but that was not addressed. And it's sad. It really is. It's sad for Soriano because I believed in him that he had the skills to get it done. And he clearly regressed. Clearly. Let's see. We've got a bunch of comments here. Let's see. Do you listen to much betting content over content creators? And if so, does it cloud your? No, I try to have a silo mentality. I'll listen to the fighter interviews. I think that's the way to go. Soriano's still working on extending his combos past 2 punches. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. Let's see. Puna is done. Yeah, it was bad. I had minus 250 on Soriano there. He ended up closing around minus 350, but you saw it was bad. Yeah, Kai Kamaka. Yes. Oof. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Kai Kamaka, Danny Gay's the shining star in that room. But Puna, tough look there. And then we have Joaquim Silva taking on Clay Guida. And Clay Guida, what can you say? The king of purposeless movement was at it again. And he was trying his best. He had a solid gas tank, went all 15 minutes hard. And Joaquim Silva put him in a number of submission attempts. Guida was able to come out the other side. Guida was landing on the feet. And Silva seemed like he was caught up in almost paralyzed by the erratic movement of Clay Guida. And he was waiting to land that left hook counter, and he just couldn't do it. And every time he'd throw, the erraticness of Clay Guida, Clay was the one landing often, and he actually rocked Silva a couple of times there. But I mean, 41 years of age, props to Clay Guida for the longevity in his career. I believe he has well over 50 professional fights. So happy for Guida that he was able to come out the other side without getting finished. I actually personally thought that the judges, even though I didn't believe that Clay Guida won the fight, I thought the judges were going to be swayed by the crowd. And also, Guida has a way of weaseling out these victories where he runs after the fight is over. He has his hands up, and after every round, he acts like he's won the round. So fighters can learn from the optics and the body language of Clay Guida. I believe he's won, no joke, I believe he's won at least 8 UFC fights based on his body language, fights that he should not have won. And it's interesting. So Joaquim Silva, we saw he's I'd say maybe a C minus level fighter, and he still was able to defeat Clay Guida. So I'm surprised we didn't see Guida retire here. Maybe he's going to retire in Chicago next time they have a UFC Chicago card. We'll see. But maybe UFC 300. We'll see. By the way, cheers. You can hear Big Pretty in the background. Cheers. We're working our way through these fights. We talked about the Sean Brady, Kelvin Gastelum fight. I'll be honest. Kelvin, I think making it to 170 pounds, making it to welterweight, that was one of his big goals. But after you make the weight, you do have to go into the octagon and fight. And you saw he looked a step behind, slower. That speed that he had up at middleweight he lost it down at 170 pounds. You see fighters, usually at the lower weight classes, they're much quicker. And that quickness was up with him at 185. So when he dropped a weight class, it didn't come with him. And the lightning quick transitions of Sean Brady, that was very impressive. Also the submission, Kimura, you don't see a lot of Kimura submissions in UFC that actually get executed to a point where the opponent taps. You also see folks escape the Kimura often, and this spot you saw Sean Brady utilizing the lower half of his body to keep Kelvin in check. That body lock at times was locked in, and there was no way there was nowhere for Kelvin to go. It was beautiful to watch him flow, and Kelvin was his energy meter was going down and down and down. It got to a point where there wasn't much left. So I don't know what's going to happen with Kelvin, to be honest. This may potentially be another tough weight cut down to 170. I'm not sure if he's going to stay down here, but I'd like to see him get back in there faster. A quick turnaround now. I'd like to see Kelvin back in there soon so that he doesn't end up putting on all the extra weight. Next up, we had Davison Figueiredo, who defeated Rob Font. Now, this was a fight. This was a really interesting fight because now you see Figueiredo clearly is a contender at bantamweight. That's something that that was a take-home point for me, that he passed the test here. Rob Font, man, he looks like a deer, a baby deer wobbling around out there. How many fights has this been? I've seen him, I'd say at least 5 fights that he has been rocked, and he's moving around. He gets concussed practically every fight, Rob Font, and he was not able to get his jab going. At times, there were 1 or 2, 3 jabs that he got going, but that did not pay dividends for him. And Figueiredo was managing. He was managing his energy. Figueiredo extremely economical out there, and you saw how he was able to use his range management to help him out. And how did you like at the 3rd round? I'd love to see this on my timeline, the clip of Figueiredo egging Font on, and as soon as he did that, he shot for a takedown. And when he landed that takedown, that was it. That was the end of the fight, basically, for Rob Font. He had nothing left. So that was that goes directly to the praise goes to Henry Cejudo and his team. They're working their magic behind the scenes. You saw the fight IQ paying off there, and the energy regulation, the management of energy there, very impressive for Figueiredo. And Rob Font, I'll be honest, he's 36, going to be 37 soon. He's taken so much damage. You saw the heart of a lion, but he doesn't have much left. So I'll be honest, there are maybe 4, 5, 6 fighters that took place that participated in this UFC Austin card who I don't think they have the opportunity to leave the sport on their own free will here. And like Clay Guida, Rob Font, Avila, Punahele Soriano. It wouldn't even surprise me to see Joe Selecki end up walking away. And then you had Bobby Green. Oh my gosh. He came out, looked sharp early for a few minutes, and then got rocked on the feet, and Jalen Turner did not let him off the hook. Jalen Turner finished the job. He did what he had to do. And something that I thought about, you watched Jalen Turner's pre-fight interview, and he was very transparent. He said that Dan Hooker, seeing Dan Hooker break his arm and realizing that he took a few years off of Dan Hooker's life, that messed up his head. Well, what does this do to Jalen Turner when he had Bobby Green knocked out and then kept pounding on him, and you saw Bobby Green was out cold for a while? Referee there, unfortunately, I think he saw Bobby Green covering up a little bit and gave him the benefit of the doubt. But this was a situation where he regained consciousness a couple of times, and then Turner just kept pouring it on him and knocking him out multiple times. So I think there was maybe 2 concussions, possibly 3 that took out Bobby Green there. And Bobby Green regained his consciousness and was able to come over, and they had a moment, Jalen Turner and Bobby Green. I'm glad they did. And you saw on Instagram today, Bobby Green had a message for folks. Props to Jalen Turner there. So I'm happy for Turner too. Give him a full fight camp. Let's get him back here. And also This is a situation where we've seen Turner brutally knocked out in past fights, so he knows what it's like to be on the other side of this, and it gives him some additional perspective. But that's got to be a boost for the confidence of Jalen Turner there. Been meaning to ask this: how do you go about officially tracking your bets? Do you track all your bets? What about live bets? You can't track live bets, unfortunately, in the moment. If I do make a live bet, I will put it on the timeline that I'm live play. I'll say small, medium, or large, and then typically I'll post the ticket. So that's a good question. Live bets are it's impossible to track in real time because you're literally the moment you make the play, the line is typically moving and changing, etc. And you have to have very quick trigger fingers to pull this off. A very quick internet connection. And also, if you're at the event for a live bet, that's the way to do it. If you go to the event, you have about a 3 second edge over the general public. 3 seconds. Uh, there's a 3 second delay that broadcasts have when they're live before it gets to your television. So if you're at the event, just imagine what kind of moves you can make on a live betting line there. So I know when I was in Newark, I was able to get a few live plays in, and that's another situation where you can work some magic. Um, so let's see. Yeah, thank Yanez for the line on Figgy. Okay. Yes. Yeah, him and Font. We saw what happened there. And then also, as far as, yes, I track every play that I make. I believe that's the way to do it because then you have transparency. I don't believe in having untracked bets. I think that you should track everything. Because if you're willing to make a play, then it should be part of your betting record. That was a terrible stoppage, face down, not really defending, just getting blasted. I agree. Oh wow, you win 1,000 units live untracked. That is incredible. That is remarkable. And I know it's interesting. The timeline is filled with folks who will say that. They'll say, "Thank you, Big Pretty. She carries Big Pretty carries the torch. She carries the torch around here." And the timeline is filled with folks. The timeline's filled with folks who do not even acknowledge a losing night. They won't acknowledge the bets that they made. You'll hear about live betting, how promising and how it flourished, and then you'll have that also be mentioned in the same light as the tracked bets. So there's no way to acknowledge and track the live bets. And the other thing is, you have no idea if that person behind the scenes is playing the other side of the fight as well. That's the other thing. They could have a live bet on the other fighter as well, but they're only tweeting and showing you one bet. That's why tracking pre-bets is the way to go. All right, let's talk main event of the evening, where we have Arman Tsarukyan, who defeated Benny Dariush. And we talked a little bit about this in the open, but must hammer the point home that Tsarukyan's only 27 years old. He's fighting out of one of the best gyms, American Top Team, and this kid is a physical specimen. He's got a great motor, based in ice hockey, got the killer instinct. I heard Michael Chiesa after the broadcast mentioning that he was an enforcer, that Tsarukyan was an enforcer on the ice. And I could totally see that. Somebody like, if I'll mention a name, Michael Haley, who's a shorter fighter, who played for multiple teams. I believe he was on the San Jose Sharks, the New York Islanders, a few others. Number 59. He was a fighter who had a very, like a jackhammer approach, very physical and smaller fighter. Tsarukyan's very similar in that respect, same size, and the transition, the grappling game to hold your own against Islam Makhachev at 22 years of age, when Makhachev was in his prime, that blows my mind. So it just shows you, it gives a baseline as far as the trajectory of Tsarukyan's career is high. And if you are going to catch him, if you're going to take Tsarukyan out, You better do it now because he's going to be getting better and better and better. Imagine at 29 years old in 2 years what Sarukian's going to be looking like. This is a fighter who his body's not completely worn down from wrestling his entire life. He picked it up obviously real quick, and he is a force Russian fighter. So let's see. Thank you. Thank you. I've been watching you for years now. That's transparency and tracked betting give you credibility. Very few in the space have. Thank you, JP. One thing I'll mention is even folks who do track their bets, you'll only see a lot of folks, you'll only see them post about their winning nights. They won't even acknowledge a losing night. They're like positive vibes only folks who do not acknowledge. I think you have to acknowledge the wins and the losses. It takes some guts to do that. You need to face the music, and if you post a screenshot of your winning tracked record on Bet MMA Tips, you should also post the losing screenshot as well. That's something that should be a standard of practice, of best practice, and it's something I've believed in. At the end of the day, it does give me peace of mind too. So yeah. So I think that's important. That's important. So I agree. Yes. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I know it's folks have some NFL to look forward to. I want to wish you the best. I hope every ticket on the board cashes for you. And also, if you wouldn't mind liking the video and subscribing to the channel, that'll be a big help. It's not, for me, it's not about the number of subscribers. It's about the content and the engagement that we have here, because the key here, there are a lot of folks who have a lot of followers and subscribers, etc., who are putting out content who are actually losing bettors. They're not winners, and they are offering advice here. And I'm okay with keeping the circle small. I think that's important. As long as we have solid folks who we can engage in dialogue here and talk fights. And I appreciate you chiming in during these streams. That's important as well. It's quality, not quantity. And that's the key as far as my motto goes when it comes to betting too, is pick your spots, find 3 or 4 fights on a fight card that you feel very strongly in. Unfortunately for me, one of them was Puna Soriano. But we were able to get in on the right side of the Sarukian line at -105 and -180, which he ended up closing in the -300 area or so. That was an incredible line. In hindsight, I should have went heavier on Sarukian when he was at -105. I believe I only played 1 unit at that number, and then I added a half unit at -180. But you live and you learn, and this is the thing. It's you learn every single time out. The day you think you know everything is the day you should walk away. This landscape is filled with folks who have delusions of grandeur. And like I've mentioned before, this game can humble you real quick. If you risk 20, 30, 40 units on an event, that is a dangerous proposition. And if people are tailing you and they lose 20% of their bankroll on one event, oh my goodness, that's not good. That's unforgivable. So pick your spots. And 2 more events in the year, 2 more events in 2023. Got a lot to look forward to. Got a big year ahead, and in 2024. And I appreciate everybody tuning in. So thank you. This is a labor of love. Go out, get what's yours, enjoy your Sunday, and have a great day. Thank you, folks. Thank you. Take care.